Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Fearing, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
Hey, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, the lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder.
And we are at episode 25, I believe. I could be making that up. But we're returning to work. Returning to work. This is a super, it's not... We know we like the controversial topics, circle back to the alcohol and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But returning to work is definitely, it's like a hot topic because it's so common and such a huge source of stress for new families.
Yeah. That,
we could spend a lot of time on this, I think.
I know. I mean, people spend their entire careers on helping moms do this.
Oh my gosh.
Awful. This is such a big thing. And there's so much involved. There's there's just so much involved, from emotional stuff to really technical stuff,
Yeah.
So we're going to work it all out right now.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to start by saying.
Not all of it, but
Yeah. No, we're going to get you on track though. So one of the really cool things about having a podcast and a blog and, in this social media era is that we have followers from all over the world. And I will be the first one to say that if you are listening from another country other than the United States, it is very, very highly likely that your maternity leave is way, way longer than ours is. And,
yeah, you're about to get disgusted about what you're going to hear.
Right. And our mamas here in the United States, some go back to work at 6 weeks. Some go back to work earlier than 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And some choose to stay out 3 months. Very rarely. Every once in a while, I'll have a mom that goes longer than 3 months, but it's not very common.
And that's because it's probably because there was something set up at her job where she could work that out.
Right. But it's unpaid though.
Typical. Yeah.
And it's unpaid.
Totally unpaid. Yeah.
So it's definitely a sacrifice. And it's a real decision. And I have had moms over the years, and I'm sure you've heard this too, that chose to completely not even start breastfeeding, not even initiate breastfeeding, because they knew they'd have to go back to work, and they figured they just wouldn't even get on that wagon. It's just, why should I start when I've got to go back to work anyway? So why bother? And that's sad.
Right. Yeah.
But
because it sounds so, breastfeeding is hard. It's hard enough. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it sounds hard enough. And then it's like, well, then I'm going to have to work out going back to work.
And it skews everything. It's just, so, I mean, our mom is get ready to go back to work. It's like you're already thinking about that when you're pregnant.
Yes. You're already stressing about it. I remember I stressed out about it from the beginning of pregnancy. I started stressing about it.
It's really
just the logistics alone. Right. I was like, how in the world is this going to work with the pumping and the coming and the going? And where's the baby going to be? And all of you people who work while you're breastfeeding and go back to work after, oh my God. You're amazing.
I mean, it is not. That's why, the mommy wars, whatever the hell those really are, that drives me crazy because it's it is really hard to go back to work and it is really hard to stay home. I don't know why anybody's trying to say one is harder than the other.
No, there's no way to make it easy. There's no.
It's really hard. So the mamas that decide to go back to work, you're having to think of things in a whole different way. Yeah. And moms that choose to stay home, I mean, there's still a lot.
You don't have to think about these things, so.
Right. I mean, you might not have to, start pump, but it's a whole logistical thing. Okay, now I have to pump to return to work, and I've got to stash some away, and how much do I stash, and when do I introduce the bottle, and what do I do with this, and then you're pumping from the start. It's you don't even enjoy your baby because you think you have to pump from the start of when you have this baby so that you can start stashing this milk away.
No, I remember I started, even after I decided not to go back to work, I was still panicking about the freezer stash.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody was like, why don't you, and I was freaking out about pumping, and every time I was pumping, there was no milk coming out, and I was, how am I going to get a freezer stash? And somebody was like, why do you need a freezer stash?
People are not.
They're like, why are you pumping? Why don't you just stop pumping? And I was like, oh my God. Thank you.
And it's like another competition. Well, my friend had 800 bags in the freezer.
Yes,
so
right.
How many should I have?
You see these things on social media all the time. You know, a woman who filled her deep freezer with her breast milk and then is donating it. You know, I mean, that woman is so amazing. I mean, like, there's going to be lots of, you know, newborn babies in the NICU who get to have her breast milk. It's a beautiful thing. But that's not normal.
And you don't have to do that.
No, you don't have to do that. And it's not normal. She has like a massive oversupply. Like, she's not just like a magical woman. Like, right. She's got an oversupply problem that she's making, you know, she's making a positive thing out of.
And you know, like in our country here, we have pretty good initiation rate for breastfeeding that completely drops off the radar by 3 months. Because that's when everybody's, at least then. Yeah. And before is when people are going back to work. Yep.
Yeah, I had 3 months. I had 3 unpaid months. And that's a lot from what I understand now. It didn't seem like a lot then, but now when I hear other people's stories, it is a lot. Mm-hmm. And I got to the end, you know, like I said, when I was pregnant, I started freaking out about the logistics of it. And I remember my boss, I was lucky in that my boss was like, it's going to be okay. You know, there was a bathroom right next to my office. She was like, you can pump whatever, you know, pump. I was thinking about pumping in the bathroom. Of course, now I would never, ever think about that. I would pump at my desk. But she was like, well, clean up the refrigerator. You can have a whole shelf to yourself to just, you know, put the breast milk. And, you know, most people do not get a person who's talking to them like that.
No, you don't.
When they're like, well, I don't know when you're going to pump because you're not allowed to have any breaks, which is like against the law. And people they do it all the time. They're doing it all the time. Employers are doing this all the time, and it is against the law.
It's crazy. And moms will come to me and they'll be like, well, how many times should I pump? And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this logically. You're there for an 8-hour day. You're supposed to have 2 breaks and a lunch regarding the labor law.
Right.
You're not asking for anything out of the ordinary. You're not like, I need to go out every 20 minutes.
Like a lawyer, even if you're not pregnant.
Right. It's like, it's not like you're making a crazy suggestion.
But I mean, there's so many problems with that as far as employers go. And you know, whatever. That's going to that's up to you. You know, unfortunately, you're going to be the one. If you're in a situation like that, you're going to be the champion for the women that come after you. Mm-hmm. Because no one is going to, you know, there's probably not going to be anybody there who's going to be fighting the fight with you. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to educate yourself on the laws. You're going to have to educate your employer on the laws, and you're going to have to do the work. And thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the work, because you really are doing a service to the person who comes next.
Now, and we make it sound so simple, you know, but
we haven't even talked about it yet. Yeah. So usually, we talk about returning to work. What's the first thing? First thing I think of when I think of returning to work is pumping.
Right.
So here we go. We got to pump. When do we? Let's take the worst case scenario. Well, there's probably worse case scenarios than this, but let's say 6 weeks.
Okay.
When does mom have to start pumping?
Now, there are all different trains of thought for this. But what I typically tell mothers is if your baby is breastfeeding well, you're not having any problems, the baby's not separated from you, you know, it wasn't a preemie that's, you know, or under jaundice lights or whatever the situation may be. You are together, you're breastfeeding, there's no reason for you to pick up that pump. The baby's gaining weight fine. It's just one more thing to do. And you
don't pick up the pump
for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks. Okay.
For the first 2 weeks, do nothing but breastfeed, just because then your body can get acclimated to supply. The baby can tell your body what it needs. We're not risking oversupply at that point. Like, if you do not need to pump, please do not pump. Because
and I think that's another thing that people get confused about, because they're like, I need to pump, and I did this too. You know, I need to pump in order to increase my supply, to help my supply get established.
Yeah.
That's not right.
No.
You need to breastfeed.
Right.
need to exclusively breastfeed as much as possible, skin to skin as much as possible to establish your breast supply, your milk supply.
And then take a nap or snuggle with your baby. Do not put your baby down to get on a pump in those first couple weeks. Like, seriously.
That's the opposite of what's going to help.
Right.
Your breasts are going to respond to your baby being there.
Right. And then after 2 weeks, you can start pumping if you want to. If you're going back to work at 6 weeks, I usually tell people you want to start probably by about 3 weeks. You want to do the halfway mark at least. That way, because if you're going back to work at 6 weeks and it's like week 5.5 and you're like, oh, maybe I should pick up my pump. Like, your body needs to get acclimated to using a machine to get the milk out. Your body sometimes doesn't respond well to that right away. You need the consistency of doing it. You want to maybe maybe have a day's worth or a couple days worth in the freezer. You want to not have to be doing it constantly. If you could start
you're going to have to
slow and just kind of gradually work in, that's a better way to do it instead of going, okay, I got to go back to work in 3 days. Let me start pumping after every single feeding and, wear myself out.
Yeah, right. You don't want to start after every feeding pumping all that much. And you're going to have to get used to pumping.
Yeah.
Because you think I'll just stick it on and I'll just milk myself like a cow. Like, it's not going to work like that. No. You're going to have to troubleshoot. You're going to have to get, the right size breast shields. You're going to have to figure out what setting is comfortable for you. You're going to have to figure out which one is getting what setting, how you get you're going to have to figure it out, how to get the most milk out. And
yeah, there's a learning curve. Yeah, absolutely. There's a learning curve to it. So I'm like, give yourself half the time. You're going back at 6 weeks, start by 3 weeks. I have heard some lactation consultants or some maybe in the hospital or, because moms will always ask that before they leave the hospital. Well, when can I start pumping? Or they'll ask that at breastfeeding class. When can I start pumping? Because that is their focus. They're going back to work. They need to know when they can start this. And I have heard, don't do any pumping for a month. Don't do any pumping until right before you go back. And it's like, no, now you're setting yourself up to be an anxiety,
then you're going to be
mess.
Panicking. Yeah.
Just let's be realistic about it. And if you have any questions, call a lactation consultant who can give you some guidance on this. Right. Because you don't want to mess around with oversupply and then go back to work. You don't want to be taking time where you should be with your baby and just pumping. I mean, there's
right.
Get some really good guidance on it so that you're comfortable and you're not worrying about it.
And I'd say get a lactation consultant. I mean, if you're pregnant, get a lactation consultant now. Mm-hmm. Find one. Say, hey, my name is whatever, and I'm going to have a baby. I just wanted to reach out and see if it's okay if I contact you. When my baby's born. To kind of help me. Adjust to work and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean,
she's gonna be like, yes.
I do a return to work class. If anybody wants to come to Rochester, totally love it. But I mean, I do one, once a month, and people really I have a lot of people that come because they want to know, okay, it's not even just about when do I start pumping? It's how much milk should I have stored away? When is the best time to pump? What do I do at work? How long am I gonna make this adjustment? How much milk do I send in a bottle? My baby hasn't even had a bottle. How do I make that work? And like you said, just the logistics of what do I need to pack for the day? Do I have to get up extra early now? Do I have to make sure this is there's a lot happening there. And then you have the whole, who's going to watch the baby? How are they going to feed the baby? Mm-hmm. Paced bottle feeding is really important. And, you know, there's so much to it than just going, okay, I'm just going to, throw my pump in a backpack and off to work I go. And that's going to be the end of it. There's a lot to it. Yeah, there is. And I think that's a really important thing too, is working with your caregiver, because it's well, I found a nanny, or I found a daycare or whatever, and so I'll just bring the milk to them and then everything will be fine. That's not the case. People don't know how to bottle feed babies. Moms don't know how to bottle. Nobody knows how to bottle feed a baby. It's not. They think you just put the bottle in their mouth and then you take it out when they stop sucking. Well, they're not going to stop sucking because they're a baby, and that's what they do when something's in their mouth. Mm-hmm. And so you're just going to think that then they're just going to keep feeding them, and then all your week's supply of milk that you just pumped is going to be gone, and your baby's going to be totally overfed, and you're going to be freaking out. Right. And then those moms call me and say, I need to figure out how to get more milk.
Exactly.
The
They're like,
babysitter,
I need to increase my milk supply.
I need to increase my milk supply because it's tanked now that I've started to back to work. And I'm like, how much are they giving the baby by bottle? Oh, he's taking 8 ounces every 2 hours or 3 hours. I had one mom tell me that her baby went through like 20 ounces before noon. And I'm like, what? Like,
that's too much.
But now, not only is that mom freaked out because she thinks she's got to try to get a ton of milk while she's at work, is the baby even going to want to feed when she gets home?
Right.
You know, and I've had, then the baby's like not feeding well at the breast. They'll go to the breast, but they're not going to really take the milk that they would take if they were having a regular feeding, which is really going to tank your supply. And then there's probably, the possibility, I've had moms that say, oh yeah, they feed the baby so much during the day that now the baby sleeps all night. Which, great on one side of it, but on the other side of it, that also keeps your milk supply where we want it to be.
Yes, right.
So it's like, we can't have this. We can't have this overfeeding because everybody thinks that the baby just wants to eat constantly when they're away from mom. And a lot of this is just the education piece. Like you said, you have to really work with your caregiver. Yeah. And if they say, oh, the baby's fussy, well, you know what? The baby's used to being with mom for weeks, actually for 9 months, and attached to the mom. Right. And now they're separated. Oh, and the baby's fussy, and we're surprised by that? They're starving. They're so fussy. It's like, yeah, they're fussy because now they're away from mom.
And I think that's because people don't know what else to do. It's like, and you have a place. I mean, if you have a nanny at home, that might work a little better because they're going to have, time to focus on your baby. But I mean, if there's a person who's dealing with like 5 babies, they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Oh, the baby must be hungry. Like they're not going to be like, I mean,
I don't want to make
anybody like freak out if your child's in a place with 5 other babies. Totally fine. Your baby's going to be fine.
Yeah, they're fine.
The thing is that might have to work a little bit harder to educate that person on bottle feeding just because they have other things going on. And also, the baby's going to be fussy because there's so many babies to like rock and hold. The baby is fussy. You pick it up. Right. You got to pick up the baby, put it in a carrier, put it close to you.
They can't do that at daycares.
They can't. But then these daycare providers, they don't necessarily know exactly what the baby needs. So then they feed them more. Mm-hmm. And then there goes your milk supply.
And it's frustrating. But if you know this going in, and this is another piece of like being educated with it. If you know it going in, and a lot of moms know if their baby has to go to a daycare facility, which, that's fine. But these are the things that I don't care who watches your baby, actually. I'm going to take that back. I don't care who it is. It could be grandma, and they're going to overfeed your baby.
Yeah.
Like,
and
it's just what happens.
Also you, also us. Mm-hmm. If we're pumping and we're feeding, there's some women who exclusively pump. They don't breastfeed at all. And they just pump and feed the baby with a bottle themselves. And you are in danger of overfeeding your baby because we're just not educated on how to bottle feed.
And babies also will get way more air with those bottles. So the paced bottle feeding is not only just to slow the baby down so they're taking less, it's also to help with that air intake because then they're gassier and then they're fussier. And I mean, it's definitely a whole transition when you go back
and you can
to
go, can moms right now, they can Google paced bottle feeding, or do you have anything on your blog about it? Do you have any? Can we add a link to something in our podcast?
Oh, yeah. I'll have our producer do that. I'll have our producer add a link. And it's great. It's a great key to have to be able to teach somebody like how to feed the baby. The other thing too is really ask, like if you are taking your baby to a daycare facility and you're interviewing them or taking them going on a tour of the place or whatever, find out how they treat the breast milk, because some will throw it away if they don't finish the bottle. Like by FDA laws or something. I know that's how it is in New York. If you have 4 ounces in a bottle, the baby takes 2, they'll toss that other 2. They have to by regulation. So you want to make sure that those that you're sending milk, that it's in very small increments so that nothing's getting thrown away. they might have a regulation on what kind of bottles. Maybe you wanted all glass bottles for your baby, and they say, nope, that's a hazard here. Like, you have to know these things going in.
Yeah.
So asking these questions and finding out, like, can you go there and breastfeed? Maybe they're close enough to your work where you can just pop in and breastfeed at lunch. That would be fantastic. Because then you've got, you're going in there, you're not having to pump, it's breaking up the day for both of you. I had one family that the dad was actually closer to the baby than the mom, so he would go at lunchtime and give a bottle, which was great too. Because it's a really, if you can do it, do it. And it's not for very long. Just make it an easier transition. A couple of the other things that also make it a little bit easier to go back to work is if you could start like midweek, or if you could start half days. That's a really good way to do it too. So try to talk to your employer beforehand and see if that's a possibility. Could you do like a day at home and 2 days at work 1 week, and then, increase it a little bit as you go along? Or could you start on a Wednesday instead of Monday, and now you're like the full week after you've been out for, like, just these little things can really help a lot when you're trying to make that transition.
And so how would a mom know that she has enough for the day of breast milk in her freezer?
So you don't need a lot. If your baby is 6 weeks, that's kind of what we're basing it on, but they're 6 weeks, they're probably not taking more than 2 to 3 ounces by bottle. Like 3 would be the high point. And they're doing probably 3 feeds while you're gone. So I would say, a day's worth of milk in the freezer is a lot if you have 10 ounces in there.
Yeah. Well, so that's, So, because I think that once people hear numbers, I like numbers.
Yeah.
It makes it more concrete. It's just like, I have to have a freezer stash. Well, what does that mean? Then you think like, well, I have to fill out the whole entire door with breast milk bags. Well, you don't have to do that.
No.
You just have to have. It'd be nice to have. Why you said, oh, okay. And so this is what I wanted to go back to too. So we're talking about going back to work at 6 weeks. So at 3 weeks, we're going to start pumping. Are we going to pump after every feeding?
If we're pumping at 3 weeks, I would suggest to pump in the morning right after the first feed of the day. And a lot of this depends, and I do have a lot of moms who are like, I need to know exactly what number, with what, how much, but it varies, because some moms, I've had moms that are like, I'm good with a day's backup in the freezer, and I've had moms that have said, I need to have 150 ounces before I go back. Like, that's just how they were, and very, regimented about that. And a lot of it depends on how you feel about it. If you feel like you just want a day's backup, pump once a day or pump once every other day in those weeks going back to work, and you should be fine. If you want more, you're going to have to pump more. Yeah. So you could do.
So you don't. So you're not going to start at 3 weeks. You're not going to start pumping after every feed.
No.
You don't do that to yourself. It's not necessary.
No.
You can. You can start with once or twice a day.
So
depending on what you're.
Yep. The first feed of the day is usually the most lucrative. So feed the baby and then pump, and just put that aside. If your baby only feeds off one breast, you can pump that other side. Sometimes that's or only feeds for a couple of minutes off the second breast. You can just pump that side and have that, here and there. You could pump at any point throughout the day if you want to. If you skip a feed, because sometimes people will start to introduce a bottle. That way the baby will start to get used to it. And then as they're getting ready to go back to work, maybe once every few days, they might give a bottle, or once a day even, in those final weeks before going back to work. So that the baby's kind of acclimated. You have to pump those feeds you're missing. So that is also another time where you're going to be able to get some express milk too.
So you're going to, so when you go, and then when you do go back to work, the pumping, your routine would be to pump when the baby would normally nurse.
Right. If you can pump when the baby would normally nurse, or at least every couple hours. So usually I go into a whole routine with the moms, and I'm like, all right, what time do you have to leave for work? Oh, okay. I leave for work at 7:30. So if you could feed the baby by, get one last feeding in, either, If you're the one that drops the baby off at daycare, then maybe feed the baby at daycare a few minutes after 7 or whatever. 7:30, drop the baby off, go on to work. Then you'll get a break in the morning. You should anyway. Have a break in the morning where you could pump maybe 10-ish, 10:30, lunchtime, once in the afternoon. And you should be good. That should be enough. And it's not overkill. But according to our laws, you can pump whenever you want to. You know, nobody can say anything to you if you want to pump twice in the morning.
I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah. And you have to be provided a space at your job. You have to be provided a space for you to pump.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, there's endless amounts of stories of women who are not provided that. But
it has to be a space, a private space. So you are pumping now, you know, at work 3 times maybe. But if you know, okay, I'm leaving work at 5 p.m., I always suggest that moms give a call to their caregiver and say, look, I'm headed out. Don't give the baby a bottle if you haven't yet. You know, like, because the worst thing has got to be walking in to pick up your baby ready to breastfeed them. And they say, oh, I just gave him a 3-ounce bottle half an hour ago.
Right.
No, you can breastfeed the baby where you're picking him up. If the baby's at home with a caregiver, be like, call and say, I'm going to be home by 5. Do not give a bottle anytime after 3:30 p.m. Like, that's just get it out there. You know, really do not be afraid to control this situation.
Yes.
With your caregivers, because they need to know. Otherwise, it'll just be like willy-nilly giving bottles all day long. So, you know.
Right. Well, yeah. And this was the thing. Honestly, I think if I had this information, if I had literally this knowledge of like, okay, feed the baby in the morning, drop the baby off, you know, pump 3 times during the day, tell the daycare how to feed the baby, I may have gone back to work if I had known.
It's the unknown and the anxiety of that unknown, really.
And there
was
nobody giving me this information. And I didn't have anybody to ask. I didn't know. You know, my job was being very nice about it, but they didn't know. They don't know. Like, how much should I pump? But they didn't have any kids. They were like, I don't know. I told you could have this shelf in the refrigerator. I didn't know. I don't know anything else beyond that. You know, but I didn't have any idea, and everything seems so. You know, it's this freezer. The term freezer stash was scary. My freezer's big. You know, and I'm pumping, and there's not that much coming out. You know, and come to find out later, well, that was like kind of the normal amount that was coming out. You know, and then if I had just pumped, you know, once a day, like you said, you know, up until then, you know, it wouldn't have seemed as scary, but it seems so terrifying because you've never done this before, and nobody's handing this information out except for us. We're the only ones handing this information out. But there's nowhere else to get it. It's not like when you leave the hospital, they're not like, okay, here's the manual for going back to work where all the numbers are in there.
Right.
You know, it's just like, you know, you're just left to figure it all on your own. And then it just seems undoable. It seemed completely undoable to me. And I was in a situation where I could quit. And I just did. I was like, I'm not coming back.
Now,
I had no idea what to do.
I think it's really important what you just hit on when you said, you know, that your workplace doesn't quite know what to do. Like, this is all very new. And a lot of workplaces do want to be supportive. Sometimes it's not brought up to them until maybe you know, you might be the first one. Yeah, this law's been in place for a couple of years now, but maybe somebody hasn't had a baby over there yet. You know, like it is not happening. And they're not going to come to you and say, what would you like? You need to go to them and be like, okay, this is what I can get by law. And this is what I think I will need. And most women, like, they're not demanding. They're not like, I want all this stuff. No, you just need to be comfortable and private, and you need to be able to get the milk out for your baby. But I think employers really need to understand that they will have very happy employees if they are going back, and they will want to come back if they are set up and know that this is something they're going to be able to do easily.
Right.
Now, if you cannot, and I think it's really important that we add this too, that because I did talk to a woman just the other day in this situation. She's getting a really hard time from her workplace, and they're giving her a hard time about when she can go pump and all this stuff. And we talked about how that is illegal and how she has every grounds in the world to fight that, but that can be very uncomfortable.
Sure.
If you need your job, if you're in a place that's male dominant, if maybe you're a newer employee, maybe you're a younger employee and you're like, I don't want to rock the boat. Maybe it's just not your personality to go in and rock the boat. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Like, we can work with that. We really, really can. I'm not saying, like, neither me nor Abby are standing up here and going, we think you should go in and, like, strike and, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, no, because this puts women in a very awkward position.
It does, yeah.
But you need to realize, though, too, that if you don't go and pump, your body's going to fill up with milk and you're going to be uncomfortable, which then you're risking mastitis and plugged ducts and, like, all this other stuff, too. So we need to keep you safe.
Your other option is that you could just skip a pumping just one time and go into a meeting and have your breasts leak through your shirt, and I guarantee you will get a spot.
You get whatever you want.
Somewhere to pump, because you'll freak everyone out.
But it's, but they don't know.
They don't know. And that's the thing is like, just like you don't know, we don't know, they don't know. And that's a good thing to remind that these laws are new, that all this stuff that, there's a lot of women out there who are, fighting the good fight to get these laws in place and make it easier for people to go back to work and still be able to breastfeed. But it's all so new.
It's so new.
And employers don't even know that it's a law.
They don't.
They don't. And they don't know. And you have to tell them.
Yeah.
And it might, it might not be your personality and, it might not all of that, but you're still going to have to communicate to them that this is what you need and this is what the law says, and if they don't give it to you, then, there's different ways of handling that.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good point to say that, it's not, that you do have to worry about keeping your job sometimes. And, you worry about rocking the boat and striking, and all that stuff. But so you have to find another way.
I know. And it's, it's definitely manageable. And the other thing I think I try to really tell moms that if you're struggling with an employer or you're really struggling to try to, head an agreement with what's going to work best for everybody is to even tell your employer, this is going to be maybe, because you're going back to work at what? Maybe 6 weeks. We're talking 6 weeks. Maybe it's 2 months. Maybe it's 3 months. By 6 months, you're starting solids. That can really, we can adjust routine so that your baby's getting solids while they're away from you, so that you're leaving less milk. And, this is only for a couple of months. You know,
that's a good point, too. Yeah.
This is not for years at a time. This isn't permanent. You need this. So if your employer can just kind of, suck it up, and this isn't it's fun picnic for you either. This is hard.
Right. No, you're not trying to get an extra break.
Right.
I'd rather sit around and eat Cheetos on my break, not pump.
I mean, come on. It's not forever. It really isn't. It's a couple months. We can work with it. We'll do whatever we need to do. And, sometimes moms will be like, I just cannot get away for 3 pumps. Can I do it in 2? Okay, let's see how we can do it in 2. Let's make it work for you. Mm-hmm. So, and there's ways to do it, but everybody's situation is individual. Yeah. Everybody's workplace. Honestly, teachers, they have the worst time, especially if they're elementary school, because they have all right, my kids are in art.
Right, they're there the whole time.
At this time, yeah. And then they're at gym on this time. There's no deviating that schedule. And that's a really hard thing. And waitresses and nurses, forget it. They've really, really hard time trying to get away and pump. Nobody wants to take their tables. Nobody wants to take their patients. Nobody wants to help out. It's ridiculous. But we just have to figure out how to work with it. So everybody's situation is different. So don't let anybody tell you, oh, this is what you have to do going back to work, and this is because everybody's got a different situation. So talk to someone about it that can give you some guidance, because it feels really overwhelming, but so many moms do it, and it's, you can definitely do it.
Yeah, you just have to figure out what works for your particular situation.
Right. But if we can help at all, give us,
just send us your situations and we'll try to help.
Yeah, we will absolutely try to help or at least, lead you in the direction or be your cheerleader or whatever, because we need the champions to go out there and like pave the way for us. And then eventually this won't be that taboo and people will be like, oh, you're going out to have a baby? Great. There's your room. Here's what you need. Here's where you go. Like it will get like that eventually, but we just needed to, to get there.
True.
Yeah.
You can do it.
You can do it.
Let us know. Let us know how we can help.
Absolutely. And if you have any other topic suggestions, definitely hit us up because we're always looking for more stuff to add to our list. More controversial, the better, of course. But we'll talk about whatever. And it doesn't have to be just breastfeeding. If it's parenting, we love it too. If you just weaned your baby yesterday and you still want to listen to us, give us something else to talk about. Seriously.
Right. Yeah, we should stick some more parenting in there.
I know, we really should. Because that's, that's always fun.
It's it's part of it, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's 90% of what I do. I feel like is all that. So sounds good.
Okay.
And we will hit you guys all up next week. It looks like our next thing is going to be skin to skin. So that's a fun one too.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.